Time for another edition of Talkin Tide. Travis Schreier of BamaOnline.com and Chase Goodbread of NFL.com and Crimson Cover Television with you as we check in following Alabama's 52-6 thumping of Southern California on Saturday night in Arlington, Texas at AT&T Stadium. And Chase, as I bring you in, were you more surprised by how the quarterback situation played out, or were you more surprised by the manner in which Alabama just absolutely took apart what most people felt like was a top 20 team in USC?
Surprised on both ends, Travis, and I think Nick Saban kind of duped everybody, and maybe intended to dupe everybody a little bit where the quarterbacks were concerned, because of course this past Monday when the depth chart came out and it read Cooper Bateman or Blake Barnett as your quarterbacks, I think everybody to a man said, okay, well, we'll see two quarterbacks and Jalen Hurts isn't going to be one of them. And lo and behold, Jalen Hurts is the quarterback that everybody's talking about now. So a bit of a rope-a-dope, I think, Travis, from Nick Saban regarding the quarterbacks.
Well, and there was an or, though, on the actual depth chart last Monday between the first two and Jalen Hurts. And that's something I pointed out, throughout the week. And I caught some ridicule from the boys on that roundtable at BamaOnline.com when I even dared to mention that, hey, look, this thing isn't over or might not be over for Jalen Hurts, okay? Just because Nick Saban on Monday said we're getting Cooper Bateman and Blake Barnett ready to start, I didn't sense from any of his comments on Monday that it was anywhere close to being a done deal in terms of these are the two guys we're going with. Jalen Hurts isn't going to play this year. Never really got that feeling. And then, of course, we see on Saturday night, Blake Barnett ends up getting the start, which I actually thought going into the game as late as about 3:45 on Saturday that it would be Cooper Bateman, because everything we've ever seen in the past has pointed to a guy like Cooper Bateman getting the nod in that situation. About 3:45 on Saturday afternoon, I'm in Dallas. I get a text, Chase, from a reputable source, we'll say, who tells me it's going to be Blake Barnett who starts. So I have to change my prediction at about 4 o'clock on BamaOnline.com, but the information was too good not to do that, so I went with that, and sure enough, it was Blake Barnett. You kind of felt bad for Blake Barnett, though, Saturday night, Chase. He gets 2 series. The offensive line wasn't great early. He gets sacked on a missed blitz pickup by Damian Harris, and then he's out of the game, and here comes Jalen Hurts. And really, Jalen Hurts' first couple of series weren't anything to write home about. Certainly the fumble on his opening snap that he lost on a play that, when you look at it in review, if he holds on to the football, he might have scored on the play. They had it set up perfectly, but it wasn't the flying start from either guy that Alabama ran out there in the first quarter and a half. But I guess that all's well that ends well, Chase. Your thoughts? Do you think going forward, Hurts, obviously, the one thing the guy did that we kept hearing he could do was get the offense into the end zone. And as they got going about his third or fourth possession, that's what we saw play out. Nick Saban afterwards sort of talked about this thing not being over. He's going to continue to evaluate it on an everyday basis. What do you think, Chase? Any way that Jalen Hurts doesn't start Saturday against Western Kentucky?
I'm certainly won't be surprised if Hurts is the starter against Western Kentucky, but I'm not prepared to concede that the competition's over for a couple reasons. Number one, as you kind of alluded to, Blake Barnett didn't play particularly poorly initially in the game. Did Alabama move the football when Barnett got his first couple of series? No, they didn't. But it's not like he threw the ball right to a safety or something. The plan all along, according to Saban, was to play Hurts in the third series, They got Hurts in the third series, had the fumble, as you mentioned. Then he gets on track and kind of runs away with the game. But I don't think Blake Barnett played as bad in his first couple of series as some people look back now and seem to think. And obviously, when he came back on the back end of the game, he was far better. And I'll tell you what, people might say, hey, Barnett came in the game with the game out of control. There was no pressure. It was easy for him. No, I don't agree with that, because after seeing what Hurts did, there is pressure on Blake Barnett, because I think he knew when he went back in the second half after what Hurts had done, he knew I better make some plays here, or there isn't going to be a competition.
And you know what he didn't do? He didn't turn the football over. And at the end of the day, Hurts still did that twice. He had an interception early in the third quarter on a poorly thrown ball. And I promise you, when we hear from Nick Saban on Monday, those are the things he'll talk about as much as anything, taking care of the football. Because at the end of the day, what is Nick Saban's biggest concern about playing a young quarterback, Chase? Turning the football over.
Ball security.
And it was over.
Ball security is what it's about.
It was overlooked Saturday night because when he wasn't turning the ball over, he was getting Alabama in the end zone. Now, again, the first couple of series, it really didn't go that way for him. But by that fourth series, it did. He hit the big 3rd and 13 bomb to Ardarius Stewart for a touchdown, and away they went. So it worked out. But I can promise you the things that stood out to Nick Saban as much as anything with Jalen Hurts were the turnovers. And those are going to need to be cleaned up. And I'm with everybody else. I thought Jalen Hurts, for a true freshman in that setting, was outstanding. But again, if that happens a couple of times a game going forward, we will still see Blake Barnett. I really believe that because of what you just said. Blake Barnett played really well in the game. In fact, I would say the two best throws in the game came from Barnett. And yes, the game was already put away by the time he made them, but the strike he hit O.J. Howard with, Chase, down the middle of the field for 40 yards in the third quarter, I believe it was, and then the dime he dropped to Garrett Dieter for the 45-yard touchdown pass in the fourth quarter, those were big-time throws, and they were indicative of why Saban wanted to get a look at this guy in the first place, because he can do those things. And so, I can certainly see why everyone would think, well, if it's over, it's Jalen Hurts, and it may very well be. But I think Blake Barnett showed enough and was legitimate enough in doing it that he still warrants consideration. And again, the fact he didn't turn the ball over.
Yeah, I think we'll see both quarterbacks again, certainly against Western Kentucky. And when we get into the SEC schedule, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. I think that's where you kind of see your final separation at that position when Alabama gets into SEC play. But I don't think it's over. I think it's still a competition. I think Hurts was very impressive. Thought it was telling also, Travis, from Saban's post-game remarks that he felt like Hurts' presence in the game had something to do with the running game getting opened up because with the zone read, the defensive ends respected Hurts on the keeper enough, and maybe that sprung some things inside. Certainly Alabama didn't run the ball especially well when Hurts wasn't in the game, especially early in the game before he even got his first chance. So I guess we'll be seeing a little zone read if Jalen Hurts continues to be the guy, and that's I thought that was a telling remark from Nick Saban.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think it definitely helped because early in the game between the tackles it was impossible. I want to say Damian Harris's first 4 carries went for 10 yards, and then things started to open up about midway through the second quarter when really everything started to work for Hurts and the running game. Hurts hit a big third down throw, I thought, to Calvin Ridley on a little bootleg to his left, and they didn't get anything out of that drive, Chase, but it seemed to settle everybody offensively. They got a couple first downs, moved the ball a little bit, and then the next possession, they hit the deep ball to Ardarius Stewart for 39 yards and a touchdown. So from that point forward, things opened up a good bit. And I thought the offensive line did a better job, too, as the game moved on. Seemed to do a better job getting on blocks, not just getting on them, but staying on them. And then you saw Damian Harris really start to take off. But the quarterback situation in general, I think you got to be happy with it because between Jalen Hurts and Blake Barnett, I thought you got good enough play. But ultimately, Chase, we're going to talk about the offense a ton. Everybody is this coming week because of Jalen Hurts and the running back situation with Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough, and the young guys even were involved a pretty good bit in that as well. But for me, it all still starts with that defense. Just a dominant performance. Gave up a big play early that led to a field goal, but really after those first or second drives of the game, there was nothing there for SC.
Katie bar the door, isn't that what they say? It was the kind of defense you expect from Alabama, maybe not against a team like Southern Cal, who's obviously typically very effective on the offensive side of the ball. But, yeah, the front was outstanding. They pick up 3 sacks. Jonathan Allen had 2 of those. I thought Reuben Foster played outstanding at inside linebacker. And also I thought Foster did a nice job pre-snap, which I wasn't sure I was going to see that, but I thought he communicated well and did a good job of getting Alabama aligned. You saw him he was pretty talkative, I thought, pre-snap, which was something I was kind of watching for. And being that Reggie Ragland was kind of the alpha dog pre-snap last year, you don't necessarily expect to see that right out of the gate in game 1 from Reuben Foster. Even though he's experienced, it's a different thing to be kind of in control. So impressive performance from Foster, and I thought the secondary did a nice job as well. Juju Smith-Schuster, who we talked about last week, one of the finest receivers in the country, he doesn't make his first catch until 5 minutes to go left in the third quarter with the score 38-3. So what does that say?
I agree, and I think Marlon Humphrey made a few bucks on Saturday night. Had an interception return for a touchdown. But as much as anything, the physicality that he continues to show as he moves throughout his college career, it's almost shocking to me because coming in as a 5-star prospect and a kind of a track guy, had that background, and I know he comes from a football family. I understand that. But man, the way this guy will come up and force it on the edges is very impressive. He will lower the boom on people if he gets the opportunity, and I think that, as much as his coverage skills, which are very good, obviously, and his ability to do that in the pass coverage game, has got to be the thing pro scouts are just loving right now, because that tells you he can play every down and he can get it done in the more physical aspects of the job. But I agree with you on Foster. As good as Humphrey was, as good as Jonathan Allen was, and he was very good, as good as Ardarius Stewart was on the offensive side of the ball, I thought Reuben Foster was the best player on the field, period, on Saturday night. I really did. I just thought that, in terms of the presence, and you said it, he was in control of things out there. He provided leadership when he needed to some younger guys, but just against the running game, he was apparent. He's improved so much in pass coverage. That's the area I never would have expected it, really, with Reuben Foster. Just has become an every down, all-around player. And to have just 4 tackles in the game, Chase, I still thought it was as dominating a presence, I guess you could say, by an inside linebacker that I've seen in a game from a Nick Saban inside linebacker during his time at Alabama. I just thought he was clear-cut the man out there on Saturday night.
Big night for Reuben Foster for sure. I got a question for you about this Southern Cal game, Travis, that will kind of wrap up our Southern Cal talk a little bit here in the next little while. But we're going to jump into some thank yous as we do here on Talkin' Tide real quick with some sponsors that keep this show going, keep this show on the air, and I'll kick things off. North River Dental Associates, by all means, if you live anywhere in the Tuscaloosa area, trust your smile and your family's smile to Dr. Jack Smalley over at North River Dental Associates. His caring staff can do all kinds of things from routine cleanings and checkups to implant treatments and more. Check them out. The phone number is 752-2506, or you can call check out northriverdentist.com on the web for an appointment. They do a great job over there, Dr. Jack Smalley and his staff.
Absolutely, they do a great job. If they can keep me cleaned up and in teeth, they're doing a good job over there at North River Dental. But I also want to thank a former football player for Paul Bear Bryant in his own right, and Greg Peoples, the general manager over at Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. Chase, we do this first pod of the week on a Sunday night. I just got back from Dallas from covering the game out there on Saturday night, and wow, what a ride we had out there this weekend. We took one of those Sprinter vans from Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa, all leather inside, a couple of Apple televisions. I mean, I felt like I was in a boy band in the 80s or something, the rock star treatment. It was absolutely unbelievable, but so many other great choices for you at Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa, including right now a 2016 C300 that you can lease for $322 a month. That's right, a C300 for lease, $322 a month. 3200 Skyland Boulevard is the address. Give them a shout out over there on the south side of Tuscaloosa. Greg Peoples again, and the great people at Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. What a great weekend. If you're interested in one of those Sprinter vans, give them a call. Go by, check them out at Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. They'll get you set up. Don't go somewhere else and pay tens of thousands more for a Sprinter van. Stay right here in Tuscaloosa. Go to Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa, and they'll get you set up today. So there we go, Chase. As we wind up, I know our Southern Cal Talk wanted to ask you a question. I think you had a question for me too. Anthony Averett had a big role in this game as that fifth defensive back. What did you think? Obviously, Southern Cal comes out early and takes a shot. They hit a 36-yard pass play, sets up a field goal. Other than that, I thought he played pretty well.
Came right after him, didn't they? It
Yeah.
didn't take long, and not shocking, and a good play call. I mean, Clay Helton's staff, I don't think there's any doubt they identified him as the one guy in the Alabama secondary who didn't have any real experience. They go right after him on the first play. They get a big play, but they really didn't go back after him. When that first play hit on Averett, I'm thinking, well, they're going to take 3 or 4 shots like that on him in this game, and I really didn't think they attacked him throughout the game as much as I thought they would after watching that opening play. He ends up leading the team in tackles, 7 solos, 1 assist, and he's very athletic. There's no question he can run. He's got long speed, which is what you want out there on the corner. He's obviously significantly smaller than Marlon Humphrey, and therefore I think we'll see teams throughout the season test him out a little bit with some of the back shoulder throws and some of the red zone throws that they might be able to take advantage of with a bigger wide receiver. But look, from an athletic standpoint, I think he's got all the tools. And if you're at the end of the day, if you're a good enough athlete and you're instinctive enough, you can overcome the size discrepancy, maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time. And I think the potential is there with him.
And the trust is there. And, he had 8 tackles in the game. So he was obviously very involved. And that's going to continue to be the theme, by the way, folks. Western Kentucky this week, they're going to look to number 28. And why wouldn't you? When you look at the options between Minkah Fitzpatrick and Marlon Humphrey, and even the safeties that Alabama is able to utilize in some different ways with Eddie Jackson and Ronnie Harrison, the versatility they give Alabama against different sets and different looks of 3, 4, maybe even 5 wide receivers. They're tough to beat, even in man coverage at the safety spot. So 28 is going to continue to be targeted. Yeah, he gave up a play, thought he had pretty good coverage on that play, and then performed pretty well the rest of the night. So good for number 28, Anthony Averett. Now, what's the question, Chase, that you had? Let's knock it out.
The question, and I'll give you my answer on the front end. I'm interested to hear yours, but how much of this game was a dominant performance on Alabama's part, where they put the beat down on Southern Cal, and how much of it was a giveaway by the Trojans? And I'm going to take the side of that argument that Alabama fans probably won't like and say, I thought Southern Cal in large measure handed the game away. And here's why I say that. From a couple minutes left in the first half until 5 minutes into the second half, so really about 7 minutes of game clock total across the halves, they handed Alabama 21 points, handed it to them. And what I'm talking about, of course, is they're facing a 10-3 deficit late in the first half, so they're right in the game. It's a one-score game. Marlon Humphrey goes 20 or so yards with the interception return. That's 7 points right there. Well, their next possession, as we know, that's where Alabama's next possession. Southern Cal comes with that corner blitz, and no safety over the top.
Well, they brought the safety too. You can bring the corner, but don't bring that safety too, because that's kind of who you're counting on to roll over on that corner blitz. Yeah. But when you bring both, your inside linebacker is not going to get back there. So, that was a mega blitz bust, right?
That's a free 7 too. Yeah. That's an easier 7 than Marlon Humphrey's 7. And then in the second half, the next Southern Cal possession was when the punter mishandled a snap and just fell on the ball in the red zone, and that was another giveaway. So that's 21 points right there that Southern Cal put a big bright red bow around and just handed it to Nick Saban. And so your score goes just in that the sequence of those. Interestingly enough, too, the miscues I just described for Southern Cal: one on offense, one on defense, one on special teams. So they hit the gamut, all aspects of the game, and giving away a touchdown in each aspect. So the game goes from 10-3 to 31-3, really game clock-wise in the blink of an eye.
Oh, it did, and I agree. And I think there's a couple of different ways to look at that. I'd also say that, Southern Cal maybe got away from the running game a little too early, a little too quickly. They were up 10-3 before the pick six by Marlon Humphrey, and they went a stretch of about 10 plays where they threw it 8 times and only ran it twice. I'm thinking if it's a 10-3 game, you're thinking, let's just get this thing to the half and get it into the second half, a one-score game, and who knows? We've already seen the freshman quarterback turn the ball over once, and sure enough, he turned it over early in the third, too. But I thought Alabama tried to help SC in its own right, too. The botched zone read play with Hurts, the interception from Hurts. So Alabama, I wouldn't say was perfect in its own right. But, you talk about the fetal position punter for SC on the botched snap. Well, conversely, J.K. Scott was lights out. And he was huge, I thought, early in the game. It's a 3-0 game. The offense is doing nothing. And Scott delivers with punts of like 50, 54, which, by the way, went out of bounds at the USC 2, and then a 47, his first 3 punts. So he kept it in a situation where, Alabama could stay with the plan, I thought, in large part. And, of course, that defense, too. And, that defense, Chase, we've seen them, since Saban's been here, okay? But in terms of disruptiveness and the ability to close on people, I don't think I've seen him have one like this. I don't recall one being as dynamic, I guess you could say, and as athletic as what we're seeing from this group. I know it's one game, and we'll see. The key's going to be health. They still can't afford to lose some frontline guys up front. But that group we saw Saturday night, wow. And SC was supposed to have an offensive line that was certainly comparable to most that Alabama will see in the Southeastern Conference this year.
Zach Banner had his problems, didn't he, with the pass rush?
You can kind of see that coming. 6'9" is great and all, but when you're dealing with guys with speed like this, and not only that, but Ryan Anderson, and Tim Williams and Jonathan Allen, they understand leverage. So if you're 6'9", you're giving that up too. So it's not just the speed, as you know from working with the people you work with the draft stuff. What is it? Speed to power. And that's what a lot of these guys for Alabama can bring. And being a 6'9" offensive lineman, it's a tough ask against those guys, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Tim Williams and Ryan Anderson are going to be a handful once again for any offensive tackle. Banner had his struggles, no question about it. I thought the whole offensive line for Southern Cal looked, for the most part, pretty overmatched. They're big. It's probably the biggest offensive line that Alabama will see all year. Maybe not the best, but certainly the biggest. And it just it didn't work out for the Trojans whatsoever. They worked hard in the preseason on a power running game. Clay Helton said multiple times in August, we need to be able to run the football better, and they ran into the best possible acid test they could have in week 1 and did little to nothing on the ground. Southern Cal averaged 2.1 yards per rush, so they've got their work cut out for them. Alabama's defense, they're gonna would Jalen Hurts, maybe coughing up a turnover here and there. Barnett, being a freshman, he'll do it. There are going to be some games this year, as long as Alabama's playing a freshman at quarterback. There are going to be some games this year, plenty of games where the offense is going to stumble and maybe make a big mistake and maybe set up the opposing offense on a short field. And this Alabama defense, once again, looks like it might be the caliber that it can withstand heat like that and turn a team away and maybe only give up a field goal or maybe get a 3 and out on a relatively short field.
Absolutely. And as we move throughout another edition of Talkin' Tide, Travis Schreier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com and also host of Southern Fried Sports, which you can hear each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon on Tide 102.9 FM in Tuscaloosa and Tide1029.com. Want to, again, take some time to thank people who make the podcast what it is and make it possible, really. And I'll start this time around, Chase, with Southern Ale House. Southern Ale House at 1530 McFarland Boulevard. Wow, you talk about a great menu. You talk about a full bar. You talk about craft beers. Everything you could want from those standpoints, you're going to find at Southern Ale House. Again, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. That's across the river from the University of Alabama. On your left, heading from UA, just before you get to Indian Hills Country Club. I had the smoked pork chop the other night, and I got to tell you, I take a lot of pride in my ability to smoke pork chops, and I know you do too, Chase. But this thing was incredible, and I keep trying different things. And I love the Yardbird smoked chicken sandwich. The meatloaf, Chase and I can both attest to. So many great items, so many great options for you on that menu. And again, all the best craft brews, local brews you're going to find at Southern Ale House. Southern Ale House, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North.
Crawford Insurance, also a big part of the Talkin' Tide podcast. Recent car accident, credit trouble, traffic tickets, any of that can make it difficult to get reasonably priced automobile insurance. So if you've had a couple of tickets, your insurance prices are going up, you're looking for a cheaper route, go with Crawford Insurance. They've got a couple of offices in Tuscaloosa. One of them is on Skyland Boulevard near Locklear Dodge. Another one in downtown Tuscaloosa on 7th Street. It's the local way to go for reasonably priced car insurance. Rates as low as $28 a month, serving Tuscaloosa, Pickens, Hale, and Bibb counties. It's West Alabama's low-cost insurer. Give them a call at 205-752-6489 for a free quote, or check out one of those Crawford insurance offices in Tuscaloosa today.
Chase, as we move towards the completion of another edition of Talkin' Tide, we got to talk about the weekend that was, or at least it was until Sunday night. And as we tape this, Notre Dame and Texas tied at 37, headed to overtime in a Sunday night thriller in Austin. So a great game unfolding right now out in the state of Texas. A lot better than the one we saw on Saturday night in Arlington. And how about the weekend of college football in the state of Texas alone, Chase? You had UCLA at Texas A&M, a couple of good helmets right there, right? USC and Alabama in Arlington. And then why not just cap it off Sunday night with Notre Dame visiting Austin? I'd say Texas pretty much had the market cornered on helmets over the weekend, but a lot of good football, or what we thought would be good football, and certainly the Southeastern Conference kind of limping into Monday night's game between Ole Miss and Florida State. Kind of your top takeaways, Chase, so far from the weekend, other than Alabama, which obviously set the tone for the entire league in terms of being the flagship school once again with a chance to win it all. But biggest surprise, non-surprises, what did you sort of take away from the weekend today?
Probably biggest surprise for me has to be Auburn's defense, right? I mean, I realize they're playing at home, and they typically play well at home, but I just did not expect Clemson to go in there with the best quarterback in the country and have that much trouble offensively. Clemson, number 2 in the nation, gets it done at Auburn, 19-13, your final score, but really impressed with the way Auburn's defense played. I wasn't expecting it. I predicted a rout. It didn't happen, so I was certainly 0-1 in that regard, picking Clemson to blow them. I did pick Clemson to win, obviously, but thought that game was going to be a hammer, and it certainly was not. So one surprise certainly there, that Auburn's defense played as well as they did. How about you, Travis?
Yeah, I guess I figured that Auburn's defensive front, as talented and as deep as it is, could give them at least a chance to hang in. But I'm with you. I thought Clemson would score more than 19 points in the game down on the Plains. So I would say that was a bit of a surprise. But the man out in Vegas, he knew something, didn't he? He had that line right about 7 at kickoff. It was a 6-point game.
He did.
Sometimes you got to listen to him. He doesn't always speak real clearly, though. You can't understand. He only says what he wants you to hear. And so sometimes you can't hear him so good. But that was an interesting game, I thought, on Saturday night, late night Saturday night. But for me, it's got to go back to Tennessee on Thursday. Just to see the Vols struggle like that at home against a group of 5 opponent that was an FCS school just a couple of years ago. And yeah, I know Appalachian State 9 years ago beat Michigan in the Big House. Well, yeah, that's great. But you know what? If Tennessee is really supposed to be a top 10 team, Chase, and they're playing at home, they shouldn't need overtime to beat Appalachian State. And so, all due respect to App State, and I have an appreciation for their history, certainly at the FCS level in the Southern Conference and all those things. The biggest thing that stood out to me about Tennessee in that game was how it got handled up front. And you and I both know, if you can't take care of business at a very high level in those areas in the SEC, how legitimate is your candidacy for an SEC title? Maybe we'll see Tennessee respond this week up in Bristol against Virginia Tech and put in a dominant performance. But, man, I didn't walk away from that game last Thursday night feeling like Tennessee was a legit contender. And it made me feel even happier that, or more good about my pick of Florida in the East going into the season. Although Florida on Saturday against an FCS opponent scores just 24 points against UMass in a 24-7 win. So I guess really what we're talking about is over in the SEC East, what really stood out to you? I guess Georgia winning in Kirby Smart's debut against a pretty good North Carolina team. That was probably the most impressive win of the weekend, I would have to say, over there for sure.
32 carries for Nick Chubb. Did you see
amazing.
That coming? I mean, we knew he was going to play. We knew, and Kirby Smart said we don't have any restrictions on this guy. No kidding. 32 carries. Didn't see that coming, and good for Nick Chubb. 222 yards. Actually was the second highest rushing total of his career coming off a knee injury. Pretty impressive for sure. Yeah, and another just broader SEC takeaway, Travis, from week one, and you recognize it's just the first week of the season. 2 months from now, we might feel differently, but just on a 1 week snapshot. The people who like to criticize the SEC as being a league that's weak at the quarterback position, well, this is looking like it might be a glory year for that crowd, because you can just go up and down the list of SEC squads this year, and I don't know if the quarterback's play is there at all, frankly. I mean, I don't think there's any question Chad Kelly's the best quarterback in the league, and he may show that tomorrow night against Florida State. But you get past him, Josh Dobbs, I think a lot of people felt like was probably the second best quarterback in the league coming into the year. He looked as uncomfortable as could be, I thought, against Appalachian State. And then you just look around. South Carolina doesn't have much at quarterback.
How about Brandon Harris?
Luke Del Rio's, Luke Del Rio struggled for Florida against UMass. I don't think Drew Lock at Missouri is going to be leading them to any promised lands. You've got, Auburn, Sean White.
They played like 5 different guys. They had tight ends taking
doesn't
snaps.
Impress me, right? Yeah. What does Brandon Harris do for LSU? Not enough. Wisconsin was a tough opponent. I mean, you could just go up and down the list, Travis.
Look, Brandon Harris.
Who's going to be the second best quarterback in this league this year? I couldn't begin to tell you.
Brandon Harris is the poster child for what you're talking about. I mean, he is when people rail on quarterback play in the SEC. There's a big what do they call those wall posters? I forget what they call them now.
Fat heads.
There's a big fat head of Brandon Harris on the wall when they talk about that. I mean, it's pathetic. It's so bad at LSU that we haven't even mentioned that loss to Wisconsin as a real standout takeaway. And it probably should be at the top of the list. When you look at that roster in terms of top to bottom, everything else being in place, other than quarterback play, other than a functional offense outside of Leonard Fournette. And even that is struggling at times. So, Malachi Dupree, Trayvon Durrell on the outside, and you can't get more out of that offense with Leonard Fournette and Darius Geis in the backfield with a very talented offensive line, Chase. So, yeah, Brandon Harris, it all goes back to him. And Cam Cameron, by the way. Don't spare him in any of this. But also Les Miles. Because Les Miles, his stubbornness and the middle finger that he basically gave LSU's administration and their supporters in keeping Cameron around and sticking with the philosophy that is ultimately Les Miles' philosophy, it's led to that program underachieving at a massive, massive level. So, yeah, quarterback play, though, what you're talking about, I still would go with maybe Josh Dobbs. He wasn't inspiring, I know, against Appalachian State. But right now, until I see a little bit more from the Alabama situation, need to see more from Luke Del Rio. Georgia, I thought that
Trevor Knight might have something to say about it.
Trevor Knight played pretty well against UCLA. It's just a bunch of guys right now. That's all it is. A bunch of guys.
Going to be fun to watch all that unfold, but certainly it is not looking like a banner year on the whole for quarterbacks in the Southeastern Conference. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not looking pretty after week one. How bad is Mississippi State losing to South Alabama? I think we knew it was going to be a long road for the Bulldogs to replace Dak Prescott. But geez, that's not the way you want to come out of the gate if you're Dan Mullen, Travis.
Well, and those are the games. Those are the games that have gotten Dan Mullen to bowl games. Okay. I mean, I like Dan Mullen okay as a coach. I'm not saying he's Newt or Bear or any of those guys, but let's be honest. There's been those 6-6 and 7-5 seasons that he's had plenty of. Maybe a few eights in there, where they've gotten to bowl games based largely on games like Saturday. So when they lose one like that, with the situation that you just outlined at quarterback, yeah, good luck getting to a bowl game this year, Dan. It's going to be the only thing Mississippi State has going for it right now, Chase, is that thundercloud hanging over Oxford called the NCAA. That's the only thing Mississippi State really has going for its program right now.
And you got a problem with your program in general. If the best thing you can say about your own program is a dark cloud over the rival, then that tells you all you need to know about where Mississippi State is right now as a program.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, I know we overreact and we call it Overreaction Monday, or this year it'll be a Tuesday because we'll have Florida State and Ole Miss on Monday night. But I still think there was enough you could see in the opening week about some teams to think, this is not going to go well this year. And I think we just touched on a few of them. But it was a fun weekend, man. I really enjoyed it out in Dallas. It's always a good trip out there. Chase, we both love good barbecue. We both are, I think, pretty much biased towards what we have around us, even right here in the hamlet known as Tuscaloosa. And it's great. We've got a couple of barbecue titans. There's no doubt about it. Had some great barbecue out there Saturday. Went to Pecan Lodge, which is highly acclaimed. You hear 2-hour wait, Chase, at lunch on Saturday to eat barbecue. A 2-hour wait. It was good, okay? The brisket, that's the thing. You can't get brisket like you get here. You just can't. And it was excellent. But I'm sitting there eating it, and I'm going to myself anyway, I just waited 2 hours to eat barbecue that might be as good as what I can get 10 minutes from my house with no wait. What is it? What is it in us as Southerners that makes us do that? It's like we know we don't have to wait to get barbecue where we live. Why would we do it in Dallas, Texas? That was my thoughts as I sat there having my brisket, and it was good. It was good, but 2-hour wait. What was I thinking? I don't know.
If you want to call yourself a barbecue connoisseur or a wine connoisseur or a connoisseur of anything, sometimes you got to be willing to put in the time to later say, been there, done that. The
best thing about that 2-hour wait was that there was a 7-Eleven right around the corner that was selling tall boys for $2. So the boys may have rolled down there and picked up a couple of the ice cold tall boys for the wait, and that helped a little bit. But man, it was very good. Don't get me wrong. Pecan Lodge, again, a lot of people love it. Brisket had great ribs, not as good as Archibald's or even Dreamland. But jalapeno mac and cheese with bacon, fried okra. It was great. It really was. But man, a 2-hour wait. And the line was wrapped literally all the way around the corner and down the block. I never seen anything like it. And I'm talking about 11 a.m., not 12 a.m., not noon. This was 11 a.m. when it opened. The line was already down the block. So
tends to ramp up expectations, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can recommend Pecan Lodge if you're in the Dallas area. Hey, knock it out. But just know that if you're in this area or the state of Alabama, you probably have just as good of options right around you without the 2-hour wait. Chase, you got anything else for us before we wrap things up?
I think that'll close it out, Travis, for this edition of Talkin' Tide. Alabama obviously has Western Kentucky on tap. That's an ESPN 2 game over on the Deuce, a 2:30 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. And a little bit later in the week, Travis, Season 2, Episode 3 of Talkin' Tide. We'll dive into that Crimson Tide Challenge from A to Z.
Alabama opens as, I think, a 25, 26-point favorite, somewhere in that neighborhood. You a little surprised by that initial number, Chase? Is it a trap?
Western Kentucky, here's a little bit of a quick sneak preview on that. Western Kentucky, they lost their quarterback from last year, Brandon Doughty, who's one of the best quarterbacks in college football last year. So coming back with a new quarterback, I'm not surprised that spread is that big, but they do bring back a lot of talent at receiver. Some guys that were big targets for Doughty last year are back again. Keep an eye on the Western Kentucky receivers against Alabama. If there's any aspect of the game, all right, that can give Alabama a legit challenge, it's going to be the WKU receivers, and we'll talk
Legit.
more about that this week.
Definitely have a very nice receiving core. A lot of those guys who were responsible for a lot of that production last year are back. And I'll give you some thoughts on the next podcast on why I think that number is what it is based on comparable opponents from a year ago, maybe, in a road game for Western Kentucky. So we'll do all that and more on the next edition coming up midweek of Talkin' Tide. Travis Schreier of BamaOnline.com and Southern Fried Sports weekdays from 11 a.m. until noon on Tide 102.9 FM in Tuscaloosa and Tide1029.com. I want to thank our sponsors once again, Chase. Real quick as we wrap up, I know you want to do the same. Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa, also Southern Ale House, and for you,
Crawford Auto Insurance and North River Dental Associates. Check them out. Some great local businesses, all four of them.
Look forward to doing it again coming up in a few days, Chase, as we prepare you for Alabama, Western Kentucky coming up Saturday afternoon, the home opener at Bryant-Denny Stadium for the Alabama Crimson Tide. For Chase Goodbread of NFL.com and Crimson Cover Television, Travis Schreier of BamaOnline.com and Southern Fried Sports on Tide 102.9 FM. We'll catch you again when Talkin' Tide returns midweek. Talk to you again soon. Have a good evening.